What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Flow. We are going to talk today about vendor lock-in. Last week, we saw Twitter blowing up with Bubble's pricing increase. We've seen this in the past with Webflow increasing prices, and just anytime big changes happen in these no-code platforms, we invest so much of our world kind of building in these tools and building our startups and building our businesses and building our revenue streams, that it can be a big hit when something like that changes. And so we're going to spend the episode today talking about how do you protect yourself from that? Is this an inherent risk in the industry? Are there ways to kind of get around any of this? So anyway, we've got Colleen hanging with us. Hello, Colleen. What's up? And we've got a bunch of folks in the chat. Hello. Let us know where you're watching from. I see... let's see, Maria, hello, Isabel, Maggie's in the house, Dale Jensen's here, what's up, Corey is in the house, Penny, what's up, Joshua. As always, the backdrop is open, the video back room is open. I don't think we have Acute just jumped in there. And if you want to jump in and join the conversation, you can jump in, the link is in the video description. We're going to have a good conversation. We typically take the first couple minutes and just look at stateofflow.io website and the upcoming events. So let's take a second and do that. If you're not subscribed already, this is a great place to jump in and just learn about everything that's going on in this Webflow community. Colleen does a good job with the events, and then we just kind of snip news as we go. And this is going to get more active as we just keep moving forward. So, all right. So Meetup, the No Code North is doing a hangout on April 14th. They do these on Friday. This is their lodge hangout. Go hang out with them. Let's see. We're going to have our discussion here. Friend Back Cafe. That's going on Devon Fountain. That's after the show here at 2 p.m. Let's see. Better ways to structure a Webflow blog collection hosted by Webflow. They usually do theirs on Wednesday. The Lodge meetup, like we mentioned, entrepreneurship and product building. This is going to be a good conversation. I think this is Devin. And who was the other person on that, Colleen?
Oh gosh, now I can't remember the name. Timothy. Is there a Timothy?
I guess we could click on it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
There it is. Tommy.
Okay.
Yep. So Tommy Giocco and Devin Fountain are going to talk shop about building a product and worrying about the process, marketing yourself, et cetera, et cetera. Those are always good. So that's the week in events this week. Let's get into it. Let's get into the discussion point today. I want to start with this tweet here. Colleen, any opening thoughts before we jump in here?
No, I mean, I'm glad we're doing this. I mean, this is one of those cyclical conversations that happens periodically. Anytime a vendor, a no-code tool that we use, that we rely on, either has a significant pricing change or a significant change, either if it looks like they're moving to enterprise, away from hobbyists or away from small business. And so I think it's good to be having these conversations because otherwise, you know, how does one protect oneself? How does one do better about building one's business? And, you know, just as a way of not second guessing the decisions that we're making, or maybe we should be second guessing certain decisions that we make in order to build and grow. Yeah,
it's there's so much to think about. I'll go back. There's so much to think about when you talk about like building these tools, and this is what we're going to get into. There's no way to like just TLDR. You don't want to watch the rest of the episode. You're going to get locked in if you can't write code, and even if you can write code, what like the takeaway from this is like even if you can write code, you're going to get locked into an Angular versus a React, or there's technical debt you're going to accrue. The question is how much of that technical debt are you willing to take on to accomplish the goals, like what you're trying to accomplish? And so no code brings that barrier down. Even being on AWS, right? We saw Amazon can shut you down, right? They did it to Parler. They've done it before to different services, Facebook, social media, Twitter, et cetera. Like all of these platforms, all of these tools are inherently built to keep you locked in, to keep you using the technology. And so there's no way to avoid this unless you're going to build everything from scratch. And even then you have dependencies because you're not going to write everything from scratch. You're going to use some open source library and there's dependencies there. And so really it's just balancing the risk. How much are you willing to take on? So that's going to be the grunt of the conversation here. I don't think, you know, TLDR, there's no secrets here. You're going to get locked in at some point. But anyway, there's varying degrees with which you can kind of put up with some of that stuff. So let's go. I saw Isabel Said State of Flow, Slack, and Floxy's Discord are the first things I open every single day. Love that. Look at that beautiful Lodge thumbnail. That's right, Maggie. Prairie, I don't know what you're saying here. Master Rymar, maybe DJ Rymar. I'll take that. Joshua, what's up? 3 likes already. Yeah, like the video, share the like. Penny, great topic. Hello, hello. Okay, so let's jump into this tweet. This is Mario Peshev. This was the first one I saw yesterday, or not yesterday, but last week. And this conversation just kind of like took off. And we saw the same thing with Webflow, when they did their pricing increase. So this isn't new to us, but bad news for no-code builders. Thousands may shut down their business before the end of 2024. Why? A combination of vendor lock-in, bubble, and no high-level understanding of business profitability. So he's kind of warning here. On Thursday, Bubble announced new pricing plans. Hundreds of no-code developers flagged usage peaks, resulting in 10 times higher system costs during the recent change. And so this has to do with the way they're counting cycles and what they're doing in the way that they're basically selling compute, right? When you talk about these platforms, at the end of the day, they're selling you computing power. And so there's no real good way to price that, right? It's just kind of like, hey, what will the audience take? And you try to figure out maximize profitability and how much money can we make while still keeping the audience happy, blah, blah, blah. And so you run into these impacts all the time. And so impacts a bunch of different folks, right? If you're building your SaaS, and then that's where we looked like, let's see, Michael, I don't know how you pronounce that last name, Novotny. The days of building in Bubble don't look feasible. Bubble's essentially saying you'll pay $350 a month for what he thinks is just a single recursive workflow. And this is some kind of task that's looping in the background. So in software, if you want something to execute like in the moment, that's one type of task, right? Basically, you take an action as a user, the system says, and it spins up the compute power right there, and it processes, and then it stops. When you're talking about one of these recursive tasks, basically there's a loop happening in the background all the time. Just checking. Did anybody do a thing? Did somebody check? Did somebody make an update to the database? Is there new data over here? Did somebody update a profile? Whatever it is, that task is just in the background, computing, right? And if you have your own server, no big deal. This is probably not a lot of compute. But if you're a business, you might be like, oh, this person's running all of these operations in the background. This must mean this is a profitable piece of software. Therefore, let's charge them for some of this, which means you get into some of these, some of these things. Go ahead, Colleen.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's not just, hey, this is a profitable business, maybe we should charge them. Every no-code tool that we're using, they have expenses, they have servers, Correct. They're paying AWS, they're paying, so it's they've got to cover they have to cover their costs too.
Yeah, that is for sure. And I don't know if this is Bubble passing on the cost. Like, I don't want to make any assumptions. I don't know if this is Bubble just passing on an increase they saw, or if they're just trying to build profitability on a certain line of business or whatever it may be. But yeah, there's lots of reasons that people might do this. So good clarification there, Colleen. Here's another tweet talking kind of about the same thing. And we're going to share, if you're in the Figma file, maybe we can share that in the link or in the comments. But even our own Jeff Roberts from Outseta had a blog article, and we'll share that in the links here about vendor lock-in, but I want to get through these tweets before we get over to that. So Eli over here says, seeing a lot about vendor lock-in, but lock-in is common. Whatever we build, we end up being locked into AWS, third-party integrations, authentication platforms, etc. But no one cares because we know AWS isn't going to 10x its pricing overnight. Do we know this? I don't know that we know this. It's not something they've done in the past, so they're not likely to do it in the future. But that's one of those things where you never know what it's going to be. Maybe it's not AWS. Maybe it's, again, Bubble taxing your workflows. Or who did this the other day too? Make, when they changed, or Integromat, or whatever it was that made a big change. They kind of did some of the same thing where all of a sudden these plans that were fairly low cost, powerful plans became almost restrictive, cost restrictive. Do you remember that, Colleen, too?
Make over the years Make Integromat has had pricing changes. Zapier has had pricing changes too. So yeah, pricing, and it's not always pricing, but one of the things we're also seeing playing out too is the changes that Twitter is making with their APIs. So, it can be unexpected, unplanned changes related, more than just what's costing your business, but how is it that you're running your business? What is it that you're able to do with your business? What's the service that you're able to offer?
Yeah. And maybe y'all saw the sneak peek there, got Acute in the background. I'd like to invite some of y'all to join the call. There's not that many here. I know y'all got some thoughts on this. Otherwise, why are you here? So jump in the link in the background. Acute, what are you thinking here as we just open the conversation? You got some thoughts on the vendor lock-in?
Yeah, so the thing is, especially with no code, so usually with programming, it's like this. You pay a lot of, you pay a lot upfront to have everything coded, but then the server costs are lower. The thing with these no code tools is the following. You're not only paying for the compute resources, you're also paying for the developers who write the entire thing in the first place. So basically, when you go to no code route, you have a way lower initial investment, but you have higher cost overall and scaling. If you go coding way, you have a way higher cost initially, but the scaling is not as strong. Also, RVS itself is a similar experience. For example, if I would go to host it privately, it could cut the cost by like 95%. I ran the numbers, but RVS takes over all the hosting, IP management, and a lot of other things. So basically, you could say RVS is the no-code tool for developers, but it's not no-code. It's just easy. It makes the work much easier. As similar to how a no-code platform makes our work to create websites much easier.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, that there's a lot of baked in costs in building these tools that abstracted the code away. And at some point, you got to generate your revenue back from that. The question I wonder is, how many people does it limit from building the tool in the first place? Because maybe now the costs become, prohibitive for them. So that,
and it's not.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say it's not just cost, but finding the right people. So, one of the things with no code that we're talking about and excited about is just that speed to development, that speed to execute, that ability to create an MVP that you're able to then go out, put out in front of customers and see, is the market receptive to what it is that you're building? Can always move away from no code tools by pulling in code later on.
Yeah. Yeah, let's see. Leap 8 saying Zapier Make is better than NAN, Airtable, Base Row, Firebase, Supabase. Okay, or maybe you pointing out some of these are open source?
They're open source.
Got it.
They're all open source.
So these are open source versions of kind of the same thing. I would be interested to know, Leap 8, let's see, saying built that MVP quickly with anything ease, then move over as much as you can over to open source alternatives. This is an interesting point. And we've had a discussion in the past about open source versus closed source, and I'm not sure that open source is always fully the answer in a lot of reasons, because if you don't know what you're doing, it may as well be inaccessible. So you kind of run into the same problem where, sure, like let's say a WordPress or one of these open source platforms that Leap 8 was mentioning here. If you don't know how to use the platform, or if you don't know what's happening on the back end, or if you don't know how to stand it up, your own instance of it, or run it, whatever, you're just kind of limited by a lot of things. We can have a discussion about open source versus closed source as much as we want. I think that's probably for a whole other debate, but you're still locked into some kind of hosting unless you're technically savvy enough to stand up your own servers. And there's a lot of tools that come, and there's optimizations. A lot of the articles that I found about vendor lock-in were about cloud lock-in. So cloud vendor lock-in economics, vendor lock-in, also called proprietary lock-in or customer lock-in, is a scenario. I'm zooming is a scenario where customer becomes dependent on a vendor for products and services because they're not able to use another vendor without substantial switching costs. And that's kind of the thing here, right? It's like, it's not necessarily always that it's an issue. It's that maybe the cost is going to be exorbitant, but you have to eat that cost now because changing is out of the question, right? Because that means building the whole software anew or making some fundamental change architecturally that now is not viable. So a lot of the stuff I was finding was about locked in on a server level, but totally different kind of scales here. Let's see. This is Josh asking a question. Are most of these scaling concerns irrelevant at the beginning? Scale at the rate necessary, and you'll be able to afford bigger problems later. Not everything needs to be solved up front. Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely some of it. I think that's what Colleen was even talking to a little bit earlier about the speed of just getting started with some of the no-code tools, and then, making the transition making the transition. That's what Jeff at Outseta was talking about. If we get to the bottom, I suggest y'all, let's see, I'm going to share this in the chat too. This is the article from Outseta. And if you want all these links, we'll share the Figma file, but they're all in the FigJam file. Where you talk, all things considered, no-code tools are offering a wider range of possibilities when it comes to how to build your startup, and that's a good thing. As you make your technology decision, you'll be best served to aim for low-code solutions wherever possible, and make sure you're doing an honest assessment of the potential vulnerabilities of all options present that could impact your business. This is also one of those things where, like, once you start adding a bunch of stuff, so like, not only could there be some lock-in, let's say, in Webflow, but let's say now you're using a member stack or something that's only a Webflow plugin, plus there's another dependency. Let's say you use some little widget for this little Instagram thing, and now you're locked into that. And this combination of those things is what makes it impossible for you to then just decide, hey, I'm going to go pull this code and install it on my own. And so you could get locked in just by using a variety of plugins or just by having some Twitter service. I saw the other day, folks that were using Twitter, the algorithm changed, and now their Twitter APIs, they have the full access to the code, right? They built the software themselves, but they're still locked in because, well, now locked out, really, right? So it's the difference between locked in and locked out, because Twitter's like, oh, we're going to change this algorithm on you. You guys can no longer have access to these APIs, so you're screwed no matter what. So
algorithm and pricing change too.
What's that?
Pricing change.
On
so
the APIs,
so tools like so a couple tools that I use, like TweetPic, they basically couldn't afford at their price point to, as I understand it, keep things running. So what they have subsequently done is modified their code base so that if you want to continue to use the service, that you enter in your API key. And so that goes against you as an individual hobbyist, kind of the plan that you're on with Twitter, and that's taking the load off of them. But not everybody has the skill set to be able to go in and know how to do that and how to configure that to be able to use that. I've been seeing other services like Mailbrew, which has been around for a couple of years, which also is a tool that I use. I'd gotten a notification yesterday that basically said, hey, you're disconnected. And I haven't been able to reconnect. And if you look on Twitter, basically since the beginning of April, there have been a number of people who've basically been saying that same thing. And I'm assuming it's, again, because of the pricing changes with the APIs related to Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. And this Cloudflare article actually kind of had, in a nutshell, the 4 key issues when you need to be concerned about vendor lock-in, because it's not always a concern, right? The fact that we're on Webflow is not really a concern unless Webflow like changes lots of things, right? So that's the real thing you have to weigh here. So let's go through these 4 reasons that Cloudflare talks about why is vendor lock-in a concern. If a vendor's quality of service declines or never meets a desired threshold to begin with, the client will be stuck with it. So you could also, the quality of service could decline afterwards, right? And so let's say they lock you in and then all of a sudden they deprecate some of those servers, but there's nobody else that does those things. And so the quality or service kind of degrades. The vendor may also drastically change their product offerings in such a way that they no longer meet your business. So let's say something changes dramatically. I don't know what that would be the case in Webflow's instance. Maybe they decide to go all e-commerce and forget about Logic or memberships or some of the other stuff, and they decide to go directly at Shopify. That might change some of your, if you're not doing e-commerce and you were just trying to build a membership site. And so like there could be a shift in the product itself. The vendor may go out of business. I think this is less of a concern here with, Webflow now. I think this was a concern earlier on. We talked about this in the Framer discussion. In the early stages of these businesses, in the early stages of these startups, you never know whether they're going to survive. And so you get locked into some platform, you build it in as an integral part of your business, and then all of a sudden they're out of business and you're screwed. And again, this isn't really a concern for like small businesses. If you've got a single client or two, a little agency or something, not that it's not a concern, but you could probably, first of all, you may have some more wiggle room with those clients. I guess anytime you got revenue and people's expectations tied to a system that has to change, that's not to be dismissed, whether you're small or big. But I think a lot of times, like a small platform, like let's say you're a small agency and you're just building websites for people, if you had to learn a new technology, you could do that, and then you could still start building new websites on a new stack, right? It's not like you're building some big SaaS where you have hundreds or thousands of users, and then those users are going to get flipped on their head. That's when this gets into real trouble, is when you have like these locked in reoccurring revenue. You have people kind of regularly using this. So I don't know. There's some debate there. I'm even kind of conflicted in my head as I say those things. I'm like, I'm not sure I believe you, Ryan.
Yeah, I guess as you're talking, I mean, one of the things that pops to my mind, and I mean, I've kind of moved over from WordPress world over to Webflow, but just think about when WordPress a couple of years ago started to launch Gutenberg. I remember there being a lot of discussion of folks that had agencies that had been, maintaining client sites and that type of thing, of the end of life and kind of that forcing of that moving over to start using kind of Gutenberg. And then there was the WordPress plugin that kind of kept the old editor, that classic editor look, and how long was that going to be supported? And that's been extended a couple of times. So I stepped away a bit from that. So I'm not sure all the kind of ins and outs and maybe where some of that stuff has landed, but that would be another case of, or go ahead.
Well, and that just goes to show that you're not safe in open source world either. Like, you're just not safe, especially in open source world. Then you have a community that's driving, the changes. And I don't know, right? This is like you go back to Apple. Apple's one of the biggest ones. If you have an app on the App Store, Apple's taking 30%, right? If you have a transaction that goes through on an iPhone, Apple's taking a VIG, right? They're like taking the tax. You're locked in. And I don't know. I don't know if that's good or bad. It's good for Apple, but it's also a great marketplace to distribute apps. And
I don't know. I look at that as a little bit different. Of if you are sitting down and going to create an iOS app, at least right now, that from the get-go. Versus, hey, I'm now going to do an Android app, or I'm now going to do something else. But that's not to say that
see that in the Webflow world, because people don't really know how to build plugins for Webflow other than just writing code and kind of accessing the back end of the game. And we saw, what was it? Webflow made a change to their little navigation bar. It broke a couple browser extensions. It broke the FinSuite extension. It broke the WebBay extension, or maybe there was another dependency there. But things are gonna break. I remember when we launched that extension, we got like called into the principal's office at FinSuite with some of the dev team at Webflow, and they were like, "Hey, this is cool, but we can't guarantee you that this is going to work because we're making lots of changes on the back end here. And one day you could wake up and your 10,000 users could be SOL." And, we made the decision at the time, like, okay, well, we're going to keep doing that. But that was a calculated risk. And so you can see that has impacts down the road that you may end up getting. Like, that could be a black eye. And there was real concerns at the time, without going too deep. There's a real concern there from, let's say, Webflow, because they never wanted to be at fault for causing FinSuite to have people mad at them, right? Inadvertently. And so these are things that people think about at scale. And when you're building stuff, you're just like, I don't know, move fast and break things. And you're like, get in the weeds and just make it work. And then all of a sudden you look tomorrow and you're like, it doesn't work now. It's like, what happened? And I don't know, Colleen, you were trying to jump in there.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I think calculated risk is a very good phrase. How is it that you're building your business? Are you building your business solely on, so for example, the fact, going back to Twitter having made changes recently, is your business entirely built on another thing? Or do you have some ability to kind of move things around and spread things out? So in the case of Mailbrew, while they have a bunch of Twitter related functionality, and I believe Feedly has also been impacted, they've got other aspects of their business where they can kind of recoup. So, just, I don't know, you got to, as part of that calculated risk, if you want to have a business, though, you do need to rely on other tools and things. So
let's jump
can't control everything.
Yeah. Acute's got his hand raised in the background. You got something to share here?
Yeah, so the thing is, there will be always a risk because it doesn't matter how high you go. I mean, at a certain point, you're also technically locked in with your computer vendor who creates your computer. Or let's say you build even your own chip, then you're a vendor locked in by the internet. So it doesn't matter to which level we go, we always have a vendor login. And even, for example, in the development tool, we have a certain software which allows us to deploy everywhere. But that software is also a vendor login. It's called Docker for anyone interested. And so the thing is, how can we actually avoid a vendor login? And there are two ways of scaling. There's once the macro scaling and once the micro scaling. Macro scaling basically means how am I going to structure, for example, my database, my CMS. And for example, with the price increases with Zapier, what I would recommend is just build your system very fragmented. So let's say you have a call which gets used very often, and Zapier gives you like a huge bill. Then you just hire a developer just for this one function, for this one call, and let that developer host it. So basically, have everything separated so you can modify things on the fly, and then just get the expensive parts, which cost you a lot, get the developer to do it, and that way you can go a hybrid. You have coders for the expensive parts, so you reduce the cost, and for the things which are not used often, you just use no-code solution because they're cheaper. You have to use both tools with thought and just not go for either one or the another, because then you log in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the point that Jeff was trying to make in his article here. I recommend you read it too, because it talks a lot about the preeminent stack here in the no-code space. I'm not sure when this article was written. I didn't see a date on the article here, but maybe I can look at February 25th, 2020. So this is referencing a tweet from Bental, so I'm not sure if the article is that old. But there's one dominant no-code stack: Webflow, Zapier, Airtable, and MemberStack. And this was a big thing in the space. Lots of people were kind of building on this stack for a while. And I think lots of people are still building on a similar stack to this, whether you're doing Outseta now. I know Outseta does more like, all-in-one on the login side of things. So maybe you can get rid of a couple of the different tools in there. But I know a lot of people in this no-code space are doing things like that. They're wiring a little connection over here with Make or Parabola or whatever, Coda Docs, or, writing your own webhooks if you're, like a little more technically savvy. There's lots of ways to do some of this. And I think, Acute, the point you make there is good, that finding ways to just put things together, and also maybe trying to limit those dependencies with how the things connect. So I don't know.
I think it could be interesting to see too, as these no-code tools evolve and become more mature, are we kind of forced into being more locked into a vendor? So, Webflow's logic is currently in beta. So, a year ago, depending upon what you were wanting to do, if you had data coming in off of a form, you were potentially connecting that to Make or Zapier or some other tool to then be doing something with that. Webflow now has logic. You can basically send that data over now and start to do things within the tool and not necessarily have that other piece. So you're kind of getting more locked in, and other tools are kind of doing similar things too. Zapier has recently released interfaces. Airtable, we've seen more and more things happening with scripting and their own version of automation. So again, you aren't necessarily stepping out the way that maybe you might have a year ago.
Yeah. Zach's chiming in here, says, let me bring that up. We pay a lot of vendors multiplied by number of employees. For some reason, Adobe just feels the worst. It's expensive, and we can't cancel accounts except during the special month of June for some reason. Yeah. Can't explain how much I hate not being able to cancel a service that we're no longer using. Such a waste. Interesting. I think, I don't know. I mean, I know I'm locked into Adobe Creative Cloud just because of the industry I'm in. It's like somebody's going to send me a Photoshop file or an Illustrator file or something that I'm going to need to open up. And sure, there's other softwares and you can use some whatever. But that seems like a hard one. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on Creative Cloud. Let's see. To Colleen's point, is it safer to diversify your tools? Webflow to Zap, Webflow Logic.
I don't know that it is. I mean, I think maybe it depends upon what you're building. So I can think back to one piece that I was working on, and sometimes you see on Twitter, like people share their Make flows and just the number of modules. So trying to go in and test things, I notice sometimes I'm just repeatedly, the amount of time just trying to do the QA. Does this work? Does this iteration work? Does this, happen? And it can be hard to start testing depending upon what plan you're on. With Zapier, for example, you may have a certain amount of a delay because something is only checking so often. So now it's taking development just that much longer. So I don't
Yeah,
know. I think this is something that we should be talking about
this just
and
made
thinking
me
about as we build.
Yeah, it just made me think of as you were saying that Claudia from Floxy's, didn't she work at this no code ops, which basically came about because there was no way to know, like, if you have this Airtable, Zapier, blah blah, whatever no code stack, you know, in a typical development workflow, you have error reporting and you have like monitoring systems in place, and you know, hey, there's an outage over here, my Zap failed, and that's why this other thing is. But in the no code world, there's no way to kind of know those things, right? Because the systems are independent from each other. And so there's, and you know, the market will market. So no code ops now is creating a business that's basically filling in some of those gaps and monitoring some of those services. So it's like an API layer that lives over top of your API layers that monitors if the things are doing what they're supposed to do. And it creates, you know, again, some systems for checking how these other distributed systems are built. Now, does that lead to more platform lock-in? Because now you have a platform that's monitoring your platforms, which are doing a thing that you've built a platform on top of. I don't know. You know, but again, there's a need for something like this because there's so many people building these no-code stacks that need this tool. And so it's like, okay, if I need this error reporting, I'm going to go find a thing that does this thing for me in the current iteration. I'm going to go build my business and hopefully be able to scale out of any constraints that come my way. That's the goal, right? If platform, you know, like if it's a concern for you, and I guess this is where the biggest concern comes in, it's for the startups. It's for the person that's eager beaver that doesn't have a budget who just wants to play. That's who this is going to hurt. At the end of the day, any of these price increases, any of these limitations, any of this stuff is like really just a restriction. When these prices go sky high, these accounts become restrictive. That's the only person it limits because, you know, the big enterprises, once they see the value, they don't have a problem paying, right? If Bubble saw something in the market and they were like, there's more money over here and we're going to go after that type of business, and they fundamentally shift away from the small folks, that's a strategic decision that they're going to have to deal with at some point. If Webflow makes a similar decision, that's a decision we'll have to deal with at some point. But, you know, you can't dismiss those things either. And I think that's the balance you have to play is like, how easy do you want it to be to get people into this? And how, you know, like, where do you want to grow from? And then how, as you scale into those larger use cases, do you treat those people, or how do you deal with still keeping that full on-ramp accessible from those learners all the way up into that enterprise scale potential?
Maybe though, shouldn't we want necessarily our tools to be able to evolve?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I've looked at, I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but, you know, I feel like Zapier has gotten harder and harder to use from what it used to. And so sometimes maybe it's good to have tool A that you start out with as a hobbyist. It's easy to get started with. And you move on to a different tool as your business scales, and it's a business that maybe has that error reporting or other things built in, because maybe now you need that, and maybe you didn't need that when you were a hobbyist.
Yeah. Omkar in the house. What's up, Omkar? Dale Jensen saying, I feel your pain. Zach, I think, what is it? TR Hughes. Adobe CC is a fact of life. Yeah. You know what, though? I'm going to give you a tip. Go try to cancel your subscription. If you haven't done it, they will like give you a discount and then let you renew. So even if you're not planning to cancel it, just go in your dashboard, try to cancel it, and they'll be like, hey, are you sure? We'll give you a little discount. And then just do that as often as you can. I think, yeah, I think I've done it annually since I discovered that hack. So just a little hack if you're out there. Let's see. Hot take. I don't have Adobe CC, says Joshua. You rebel. Kabarja says I got 2 months for free. There you go. See, sometimes if you do that, like you'll get that. You'll get a little sneak in. All right. What's up, Acute? Jumping in. What do you got? Oh,
I forgot my point I wanted to say there.
All right.
Did you say you had a coding story?
Yeah. So you talked about this 350 euro story on how function not stop runs. When you code and you make such a mistake, I've heard like companies who got an $80,000 bill from a single function in a single day.
Oh man,
Like,
this is why you set platform limits. I'm so glad. I'm working with a developer now, and we set up an account on AWS, and they're like, okay, so first things we're going to do is we're going to set some limits. And I was like, oh, what's that for? It's like, so you don't have what just Acute just said happened to you, that
You
you
don't
have
get
some.
nuked.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. I'm not a big fan of, like platforms like Webflow limiting like page views for their platform as a hosting thing. I understand why, but as somebody who started out kind of tinkering on the web and having viral moments, you don't want to get penalized for being successful at a certain level, right? You don't want to have to get bumped into an enterprise grade plan just because you went viral and now you're famous on YouTube or something like that. And now you got to pay $6,000 a month for your website rather than just the regular hosting fees. But that is what happens, going back to what Acute was saying, is when you do go viral and you do have these big bursts, your servers will go down. Like I remember in the old WordPress days, before I was over on a, like reliable server, when I had those little viral bursts, the site would just go down. Like you just website wouldn't exist. I remember there were times there was like 1,800 people on my site live in one moment, like for a second, like for sustained amounts of time. And those were like crazy. Those were crazy moments. But I can imagine if you have some kind of recursive software and all of a sudden you get some heavy load from your users and it goes nuts. Yeah, who knows? I do this trick with my cell phone provider. Always get the best plan. Yeah, it's so crazy. My car insurance did this. I was with, I don't remember what company it was. This is just a pricing thing. This is a total aside. And I called and I got a quote from a different company and it was so much cheaper. And so I was like, okay, let's go over here for better coverage. And then I called back to the other company to cancel and they're like, oh, well, let us requote this for you. And I'm like, why now? Like, why didn't you requote it before and give me the best price that you could offer me? And then I would have been gladly a loyal customer of yours. But now I'll never do business with you again. And it's like, oh, because we could. Oh, fuck. That's not the reason, y'all. That's not the reason to do business, because we could. Like, fuck that reason for your price increase. I don't care what the product is. Fuck that reason for a price increase. That's the problem with the society, is everyone's out there trying to get theirs. I don't have a problem with profit. I love profitable businesses, but we're in a world where this is just, and then it's like, oh, don't worry, it's in the fine print. No, you can't excuse what would otherwise be a crime or coercion or some trick because your ass is covered legally in some fine print somewhere. Like, that's not cool either. Oh, it's legal. No, it's not. It's legal. Like, there's 10,000 new laws every year. Legal doesn't matter, right? Like, there's just, okay, I'm going to step off this soapbox before we go too deep down a rabbit hole.
Can I actually say something to the pricing of Make and all
Yeah,
of that?
of course.
I think one of the things people often don't also pay attention to, a business is forced to make profits, and the issue is, let's say a business like Make or Integromat starts out, then they first want to acquire as much clients as possible, so they still run on investor money, but eventually the investor money runs dry, like with also apps like Signal and all of that. And when the investor money runs dry, then they are forced to increase the prices. So if we let's say companies who, let's say, bootstrap themselves to the top and never took investment, they don't have such issues because they know exactly how much it's going to cost and how they can scale. But whenever you, let's say, a lot of businesses these days to scale to the moon in 2 years, they often take these deals, and then at the end, I would say the user is screwed, because then suddenly the prices change, or they start to sell data or things like that. And that is generally the issue we face right now.
Yeah. Here's a Kabarza in the comments here, and if y'all want, I'd love to have some of y'all jump into the comments. Let's take this thing wild. Let's go crazy. There's a link in the description of the YouTube video. It's also pinned in the chat. Let's see if I can just click it here and it'll show up on screen. But yeah, you can join in the conversation. I'd love to get your thoughts, especially as we talk about some of this pricing stuff. Kabarza says they charge the max they can, not the fair amount, which gets you into real interesting territory, because this is where people are like, well, what's a fair amount, right? I don't know what a fair amount is. This is where this is where it gets crazy. I don't know what a fair amount is. This is where you get into like, profit's good. Well, how much is too much profit? Let's limit their profit. It's like, you get into these ideological discussions where it's like, how much is too much profit? I don't know. Anytime it feels predatory, anytime it feels like it's just the investors, if we go back to this Silicon Valley Bank, they were issuing bonuses the day the bank was taken over for insolvency. Like that seems like too much, So it's like I don't know where the limit is, but there's this moment where your gut goes like, oh, that's the line, And I guess that maybe that line's different for different folks. So that's always where the trouble is. But let's jump in. Let's see. I think we got through like all of our tweets. We're kind of through most of what I wanted to talk about here. Thanks to Bubble, it taught me about platform risk, and I'd never go back to any no-code platform. Just built my first HTML website in a day, started coding HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I know that sounds like a good idea, but there's so many other things you have to learn there. It's not just like I'm just going to learn one, because even there, you're going to run into some other dependency. You're going to run into some caching layer, some kind of optimization layer, some kind of something somewhere. I don't know.
Actually, Rayma, if you want, I could make a short description of what everything goes to hosting a website as vendor login free as possible.
Yeah, I don't think we need to dive into those details as part of the stream here. Would you charge the client the max they would pay? There's people who would argue that would be silly not to, right? I mean, there's people out here that like if a client's willing to pay you $20,000 for the project and you want to sell it for $2,000 and you sell it for $3,000, somebody would say, hey, you left $17,000 on the table, right? I don't know what the right move is there. And I think service-based and those value-based things is a little different, right? If you got a client willing to pay you $20,000 and you sell it for $20,000, all good on you. I think it's when you're talking about some of these fixed cost things where you're talking about scale. When I have 1 million users, if I double my prices, I double my profit exponentially kind of thing. That's where you start seeing some of these decisions, especially as you get investment, right? So own your platform or else, ... says Va here. Alex Vasquez. I'm sorry, Alex. I didn't mean to butcher your name here. Webflow needs to open source itself, which will never happen. Like if there's any piece of you that's holding out hope that one day Webflow is going to be open source, you're dreaming. Like you're smoking the nicest crack rocks you've ever seen. There's too much money at play. There's too many investors for any of this to happen. Could there be an open source alternative at some point that gets competitive? Maybe. But you'll never own your platform on WordPress. We do see people popping up every so often that offer hosting services, kind of like backdoor hosting, and those get shut down as quick as they pop up. I do think maybe with like DevLink is the closest you could see, not necessarily to open sourcing the platform, but to having something you could pay like a Creative Cloud where it's like $50 to pay, and then you can go do whatever you want with the code. That would be the closest thing Webflow could do to open sourcing it, where, like the hosting of your site is not dependent on paying them for the tool itself. So this is how Webflow becomes ubiquitous across all software development, the entire industry, if you ask me, is you give folks like us the ability to learn Webflow and then go interact with a dev team on the front lines. I'm working on a little browser extension. Some of y'all might know this, and I would love to be able to have those designs in Webflow, be able to manually go in and tweak and touch and mess with the design, and then be able to update that natively in the dev environment without, other hurdles. I don't know what the vendor lock-in price for that would be or what the risk for that would be, but I know that think about like Salesforce, and people are locked into Salesforce. Like you're not going anywhere. You use Salesforce at scale, like it's it. Same thing with HubSpot. HubSpot knows, right? We got you, and this is tied to your revenue. So I got to imagine all these platforms are trying to get to a place, all these big tech folks want Webflow to be the next HubSpot, the next Salesforce, the next crazy thing that's just baked in to the layer of the internet that people touch called the front end. And I could imagine that is a big piece of pie that people are looking at as far as a market share, thinking like, hey, there's lots of dollars to be made here. So I don't know how you balance all those things. Going back to the, Kabarza, what would you charge the client for the max pay? I don't know. This is a philosophical debate about, I don't know.
I mean, it is a whole other conversation. I was going to say, there are, at least in the United States, there's like the B Corp. There are, depending upon what you do as in terms of the legal structure of your business, you can potentially say and make a distinction of this is what we stand for in terms of how we are handling our money, and how much we are kind of charging and some of those types of things. But at the end,
right,
and end of the day, kind of look at it, market and capitalism, and how much will the market bear?
Yeah. And Prairie Rookie says here, if you focus on charging a fair price, though, you are going to be out of business real quick. A business is a business, not a charity. Now, there is something inherently fair about running a good business. Otherwise, you won't be in business. And so your prices do have to be fair relative to the market. I don't know who sets what fair is. It has to be profitable. It has to cover your expenses and then hopefully provide you a little bit more. Otherwise, what's the real incentive to do this? It's very difficult to run a business for negative dollars or for negative profit because, again, that business won't be in business for a while, which is what Prairie says there. But again, if a client's able to afford X, I'm going to charge them X. I'm not sure that's always the case, because do you want this client to be able to buy from you again? Do you want them to trust you to come back again? Do you want them to feel good about the value they received in and around that purchase? Do you want them to feel like they're kind of like begrudgingly doing this business because, oh shit, this guy built our website last year and now we have to do this other thing with them because X, And so there is a balance to be had here. And this is the thing I also get. This is where we could get lost in the deep philosophical stuff, but like the free market operates like a free market no matter what, right? So if you're going to charge, if you say a fair price for a website is $500 and you want to deliver a $10,000 website for $500, that's on you. You can do that. But there's always going to be people who are never going to believe they're getting the value of a $10,000 website for $500, right? They're going to want the cachet that comes with paying, because they know other people can't. This is a signal. This is why rich bros buy, fancy sports cars, is because they know other people can't. You can't fake buying a sports car, right? So if I've got the wallet to wear the Rolex and you can't, it's a status symbol. It's a thing, right? And so like, as much as we want to talk about, hey, something can be fair and the pricing, this, that, the other, there's also psychological components of the market. There's also like other things that impact the market when it comes to pricing and all of this stuff. And so, I don't know. Again, this is like, there's so many philosophical nuances as to when you start talking about what's a fair price or whether it's right or not to do this, right? If the investors, let's say, I don't know what the situation is at Bubble, but let's say it's Webflow with their pricing increase recently. If the investors come in and now the investors control the pot and they're like, hey, we can increase our pricing by 30% and that's going to impact our bottom line by X, whatever, it's hard for them to not justify as financial stewards of the business extracting the maximum value out of that. What effect does that have down chain? I don't know. And it could take years to figure it out. But I don't know if there's ever a right way. Marseille Russo says, charge the most amount you can do so you can sleep at night. Yeah, charge the most amount you can so you can sleep at night. Yeah, you're in it. What's up?
So another thing is also, when you charge people, there's also the question, are you now a freelance agency where you work on it, or are you like a software as a service? Because in one you directly trade, okay, in both you technically directly trade in your price for time, but one you basically manage like a company, and then it's also a bit more different than when you, let's say, charge people directly as an agency. As an agency owner, I would always prefer to go for much higher prices, but also if you, let's say, a company like Webflow, going also for lower prices might have advantage, because let's say we have also people from like countries where the value of the currency is not as high as the US dollar. In such countries, even such a subscription service like for Webflow might be a barrier to entry, and that could mean that in the long term, Webflow has less market share and less clients. So it's basically a very hard act to do.
Yeah. Dale says, on the other hand, don't we all want to lock in clients through what we do and how we do it and for whatever prices our prices are? Yeah. And you want to make as much money as possible doing it. And you want to be profitable and you want to like live the nice life. And this is why, again, you go back into this like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, that's a really good point, Dale. That's like, I don't know how to say it better, to be honest. Human greed is limitless. Yeah. everyone loves retainers. Everyone does love retainers. And, well, I don't know if everyone loves retainers. The creatives love retainers and the people who are on the other end. But sometimes it's good for the client, even though maybe they're not getting like max value every single day. The peace of mind of knowing I can call up so-and-so and they're going to be there. Let's say Omkar. If I got Omkar on retainer, and maybe I don't need Omkar every day, but it's worth paying Omkar whatever his retainer is to know that when I need him, I got access. This is why those big shot lawyers, play like this. Because it's like, look, my time is valuable and it's in demand. You may not need me now, but you're going to give me the money now, because when you need me, now I'll jump because I've already got your money, right? Versus if you come screaming at me, hey, I need you, I need you, I need you, in the moment, well, I may not have capacity for you. And so that's another place where, again, retainers are good. And we're all kind of in the business of selling our time and services and products and whatever it is. And so actually, 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a good discussion with a guy named Joel Eichenbach. Let's see if I can bring this up. Yeah, he's got a great business model. I've known this guy for years. Don't judge me. I'm in Photoshop, okay? Mind your business. He has a nice web design business. He's going to come on and talk to us. He has a business where he sells for a few $100s a month, different packages that you can buy. And then every 18 months, you get a new website. And he recently is moving some of his business into the world of Webflow. But I don't know how much they do monthly, but it's significant, like real significant. We'll ask him. Maybe he'll tell us on the show. The last I heard was 50K, but that was years ago, a month. And this is just reoccurring web design. If you see the websites, we could all build them. They're beautiful sites, but they're simple. There's just a system here. There's a process. And he's basically succeeded at selling his time and skills and services. But it'd be interesting to have some of this conversation with him about, how he priced it, how he came to that, what the value is, having that kind of retainer, repeat occurring business. So let's see. I'll take this as an opportunity also to promote the All Hands next week. So next week we're doing a community All Hands. We've got the open house coming up in May 16th. May. So just about a month and a week from now. We got the open house coming up, and we're going to reveal some of the plan next week. So be sure to show up for that. I don't know if we got a whole lot more for today, to be honest. I know we're right about an hour. Any other thoughts, Colleen or Acute?
No, I think maybe we need to have a discussion in the future about like maybe the philosophy in terms of pricing, since we kind of went a little bit on that as a tangent. Yeah,
I think it's interesting that the conversation kind of evolved into a philosophical discussion about pricing. I'll have to think about that and go back and watch it.
I have actually a small thought on that.
Yeah.
We are also right now moving more towards subscription-based things. So if you right now look at the trend also with cars, as the chat mentioned, it's like you own less and less and everything is subscription-based. And then we could also talk about, is this actually a good thing? Does it help us because we can get easier things? Or is it in the long-term problems because you will never own everything, you will have everything over subscriptions, and then as some CEOs said, you're going to be thankful for it. That's like also a question to talk about.
I think that'd be a really good topic. I kind of want these to be more like, okay, Omkar is saying the same thing. SaaS retainer model will lead us to own nothing. It's all going to be lock-in. Even cars to have a monthly subscription to get heated seats or like my car, I can't do the remote start unless I pay them the monthly fee. It's like, oh, good bless it. It's like, so yeah, are we headed in that world where everything's going to be subscription-based? Everyone's trying to get that reoccurring monthly revenue, the annual reoccurring revenue, whatever it is. Philosophy of pricing and ethical economics. What is fair pricing? Yeah, I think that'd be a good discussion. We have April 25th. We have scheduled. We have the next few weeks already scheduled. We have the All Hands coming up. We have that conversation with Joel coming up. And then we have, and Joel will be interesting too, because it'll be kind of at the crossroads of this discussion and the platform discussion, because he's coming from Joomla to Webflow. And then we've got Wix the week after that. And so we talked to some Framer folks. We'll talk to some Joomla folks a little bit as that Joel conversation, and we'll talk to Wix. So we want to get into some of that. But I also think this discussion is pressing and could be, we've talked about maybe trying to do some Twitter spaces or some other stuff outside of this. I'd also like these conversations to be more dynamic. I don't want to just be the person up here and Acute's back here. Sometimes we got Joshua, and sometimes we got Content Nest, and Colleen obviously is on the chiming in, and we're going to try to do a better job of bringing guests on. But y'all tell me, how do we make these more dynamic? Is the stream format not lending itself to that? Do we need to do these as a, do we need to go back to like a Zoom room where we're all in like a Zoom room or something? But I don't know. It seems like I'd like to figure out how do we make these more of a conversation rather than, what about on Butter? Yeah, we could try something like that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention. Maybe we can do it a bit more like a podcast, because right now you're also like the main instance regulating everything. You're also like screen sharing, basically planning the entire stream, also the topic. Maybe we can have open-ended like talks, podcasts on platforms like Butter, where we just discuss everything.
Yeah, the problem is you got to have we've tried this, right? You have to have some kind of structure, and there has to be some kind of direction. Otherwise, it just becomes like chaos, and then it's okay in the moment, but then it's almost useless for anything after that. And so there's this balance between trying to create something that's useful in the moment and also ethereal versus having like a conversation with someone. I do like some of that. We've talked about like doing these little happy hours or some more casual type things where it's just more of a free for all and there's not really a set topic. It's just like, hey, we're going to talk about whatever comes up. But yeah, and Josh is saying here, there has to be someone to keep focus. I still think I would do that. I still think I would be kind of the moderator and host the thing. But I think this working just needs to evolve. Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably just, we need more time, more eyeballs. So anyway, like the video, share it with a friend, pull up and send the link to your mommy and your auntie.
And subscribe.
That's right. Subscribe to the YouTube channel.
And the bell.
Let's see. If you overcharge your service and you get the reputation, eventually your reputation will weed you out. Yeah, I mean, but then look at like Louis Vuitton or look at some of these luxury folks, right? Like something about that also can be effective and beneficial, but lots of people missing out. That's right. Well, you drag them out here, right? You grab them by the toes, you grab them by air, you just pull them over. Rymar, you need to create a tip jar with ConvertKit. Oh, hey. We are thinking about some mechanisms to extract some value from our audience. Basically, as we go forward, we are going to have opportunities for you all to kind of support us financially at some level. We'll discuss some of that next week at the All Hands. Wink, wink. You should all be there. Maybe you saw me tease yesterday that Colleen and I are planning our next community initiative. Some of you already have heard and know about that. If you are close with us, if you're in the State of Flow Slack channel, if you've got direct access to Colleen or I, and you want more information on that, reach out. We've got a major campaign plan for the next 18 months. Let's talk. This is going to be our most ambitious, audacious, whatever you want to call it, campaign yet. And we're excited to kind of bring some of that to life with you all. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hear the lift squeaking, so the construction lunch break is ending. So we're going to time cap this. But let's see. I would watch a live stream of Rymar threatening to cancel Adobe. Yeah. I wonder. Yeah.
We talked about build in public.
I keep having this idea of just like some kind of live lobby where we're just hanging out, and I don't know how to do it. Maybe we just have to, I don't know what platform or where, but that would seem to be more of a place for some of these random conversations. Why not Gather? Because of the rate limits, and also Gather is hard to record and use it for later conversations. So I'd rather use something that would maybe serve that a little better. The whole stream is directed by a completely unaware construction crew. Yeah, it starts by the church bells. The church, they don't know this either. The church bells across the street start the stream. And then, the construction crew, we squeeze it in between. Hopefully that'll be over the next couple weeks. And I'll have a brand new like floor on my balcony, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. Kabarza says Discord. Yeah, for the voice chat. Discord, or I think Twitter Spaces without the stream. Unaware Construction Crew is a good agency name. Yeah, Kabarza, Discord does seem to be an option with their voice stuff. They're not good for video, and I think video is important sometimes. But yeah, Twitter Spaces are not nice because of PC access. This isn't perfect. This has not been solved yet. This type of like real-time interactive thing has not been solved yet. I have a million ideas in my head for how you would blend something like Zoom and Twitter Spaces, but also into OBS. Like that's a product that will exist in a few years. Somebody's building, I'm sure. But anyway.
Oh.
Okay, that's enough. We're rambling and the viewers are running. So if you need something like this for Codella, yeah, we could talk. Yeah, cute. Let's talk. Maybe inside of the Atmos extension. Ooh. Anyway, to be discussed at later dates. We appreciate everyone hanging out with us. Let's put this up in the background. Yeah, right on. And we're going to fade to black just like this. Goodbye, everyone.